Okay. Um, so welcome. Welcome to Nobility's BADA, Be a Digital Ally. And you can just move them along, Mark, if you would. Or today we're going to talk about being a digital ally. That's the theme of our presentations. And uh, we had this idea of actually letting people who weren't able to attend Access U see some of the highlights of the best presentations. And one of those this year was Straight Talk, What Disabled Users Want You to Know When Designing Your Product by Amy Mason and Bruno Torquato. So our agenda tonight will be to, I'm going to do a brief intro of Nobility. We'd love for you to introduce yourselves in the chat. Put your name, your organization, what you're interested in, because we're going to kind of look through our Access U recordings and figure out, based on what our audience tells us is of most interest, what to bring in next month and the month after that. So your name, your organization, your interest areas, if you put those in the chat. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about Nobility, who we are, what we do, introduce our presenters for this evening's presentation, and then we'll see an edited recorded session from Access U in May of 2024. And then the best part, I think, is the live Q&A that we get with the presenters, where we get to talk to them and hear their perspective of the presentation they've made to us. And then we'll do a little outro, and thank you all for being here and for being such great digital allies. Nobility was founded in 1999, and our purpose there was to raise awareness and skills and active engagement in the whole issue of digital equity and equal access to technology for people with disabilities. At that time, accessibility was a kind of a rare conversation piece. People were still learning how to use the internet and how to make the most of the technology, the desktop technology that most people used, and accessibility wasn't nearly as forward as it is now. So we like to think we had something to do with that. Our mission is to help create an inclusive digital world for people with disabilities. We do that through three related sets of services. First of all is awareness, raising awareness of the fact that it's an issue, why it matters. And one of the ways that we're really pleased that we get to do that is with what we call AIR, or the Accessibility Internet Rally. And that's something that's ongoing right now. If you go to the Nobility website, it's right there front and center. We're recruiting teams of people to participate and learn more about accessibility, join up with the community, be part of a team that builds an accessible website for nonprofit organizations. And then, of course, you have the chance to win glory and be first in this competition that's AIR. So learn more about it and register now on our website. That's just one of many of our awareness programs, but I wanted to highlight it because it's active right now. And then we do a lot of education, including our annual Access U, which is what this is part of. And we do that every May in Austin, here in Austin, but we've also really perfected during COVID the hybrid aspect of it, so you can attend from wherever you are. And that's every May, so keep an eye out for that. And then we do direct services to business and government agencies, including audit and advisory services. And there's, of course, more information about that on the web. So we've been doing all this for 25 years, and really welcome the fact that y'all are joining us tonight for this. Today's presenters are Amy Mason and Bruno Torquato, and they both work in accessibility at UKG, the agency UKG, and they're pictured here with their unicorn headbands from Access U. We had a happy hour called the Accessibility Unicorn because we felt like a lot of out in the career world, a lot of people were looking for just one person to do all the accessibility of an entire agency or organization. So it was a themed happy hour at Access U, and Amy and Bruno are pictured here with their unicorn headbands on, and they're going to be the presenters in the slides that Mark's going to share with you here in a minute. Now we're going to play the video and you're going to get to see it for yourself.
Our talk is called Straight Talk. What people with disabilities want you to know when designing your product. And so, nice to meet you. We're Bruno and Amy, or Amy and Bruno. We're both cat people. Yes. We have our selfies here with our cats. On the left, you've got me kind of peeking in while my Abby cat, who's a gray tabby, has got the majority of the shot. Followed a little bit lower by Livia, who is technically a tuxedo, but you can only see her little black face. And you see me here with my stepdaughters, Crunchwrap and Remy. They're also taking up the majority of the frame, as they should. I also got some cat socks on, you may notice, if you were out here. But yeah, this is us. It might be the humor that we've got these delightfully queer people having a session called Straight Talk is not lost. Not lost on us. If you can't see us, I'm wearing what I would describe as business attire from the feminine section, but definitely somewhere in between masculine and feminine, and I'm wearing makeup. And I've got a bit of an undercut haircut, so that's a little more of a masculine look. A blazer, navy blazer with little speckles of all the colors, with a lavender blouse, and a little bit of trimmed chin hair. Ooh. So yeah, neither of us are exactly the straight talk people. We're the queer straight talk people. So why you might want to listen to Amy? Amy, you want to tell them a little bit about yourself? I have been blind all my life. I'm also neurodivergent, ADHD, probably autistic. So I've been in the accessibility space as a user from the beginning. And I've also worked in a number of organizations where I've had the opportunity to talk to designers and developers, educators, and creators, and users about accessibility. Everything from instructing someone on how to use the iPhone with VoiceOver, through working with developers to create accessible calendar widgets, to working with standards bodies around understanding the realities of how the standard, say for EPUB, is being used and made available in classroom EPUB readers, or even the ability to create accessible EPUB from a blind person's perspective. Some caveats. Yep, there are some caveats, as wonderful as I am. I mostly have had experience with people who identify primarily as blind as their disability. Most of the people I've worked with have been adults or at least teenagers. I have really only worked in an environment where most of the people I've worked with already know that they have a disability and came in through a system where they were being assisted with that. And I also primarily have worked with people who are English speaking as a first language and working in the context of being here in the United States. And me, I'm Bruno. I've had about 16 years of broad experience in the web and software industry. A big part of that has been focused directly on accessibility, but I've run the gamut across the entire stack. So I've done software design, some development, usability testing, planning and facilitation. I've done some quality, some QA work as well, and more accessibility evaluations than I'm honestly comfortable doing.
recently we've done a lot of work at UKG trying to grow the program. So a lot of the focus recently has been on teaching accessibility principles and growing the overall maturity of our enterprise system. So some caveats is that I'm not really a daily screen reader user. I'm more experienced in making accessible software than I am in using software. I've worked mostly with people with cognitive and visual disabilities, so I definitely have some gaps and biases, of course. I've worked pretty much exclusively in this sort of corporate business to business environment, as contrasted with Amy, who's done a lot more work directly with community members and with teaching and things like that. Much like Amy, though, most of my professional experience is limited to English, even though I speak a few other languages. But yeah, that aside, I think we can be reasonably trusted. So let's get on with the actual info here. So this is part one, and it's just like a brief primer on interactions with disabled people.
So here's the thing. I promise most of us don't bite. We are, at the end of the day, just like y'all. We are just people, so treat us like other people, ask questions, get to know us, and we'll talk a little more going forward here in this section about what that looks like, how to speak about disability, etc.
Yeah, so we're going to start right off talking about language. Specifically, we're going to get into a little bit of the identity first versus person first debate. And I guess that's the first thing to note is that there is debate, right? So you want to take that, Amy?
Sure. Person first language kind of came about as an attempt by a lot of folks who were well-meaning in trying to explain that someone with a disability is a person first. So examples of person first language, it's often used in academia, it's often used in medical contexts. Some examples that are actually relevant here might be a man who is deaf, a woman who is blind, a girl with autism, a boy who uses a wheelchair. So you are putting the person identifier before the quote unquote condition identifier. And things are a bit mixed as to who wants to have that happen and who doesn't. Identity first. Are we ready for that slide?
I want to also just mention the brief quote that we have from
Yes.
National Center of Disability and Journalism. So I'm just going to read this directly. In the past, we've encouraged journalists and others to use person-first language. This is what Amy was mentioning now, as a default. Even with the caveat that this does not apply to all, we've heard from many people with disabilities who take issue with that advice. For us, this really emphasizes the fact that no two people are the same, either with regard to disabilities or language preferences. So that brings us right to
identity first. Identity first tends, and I won't say always, but certainly in the circles that I've run in, to be the preferred option for a lot of folks with disabilities that, once again, I've worked with and known. For example, you've got folks from the deaf culture who are actively proud of their deafness, and they would probably be a little bit upset if you called them always the man who is deaf. They would prefer to be known as a deaf man. Certainly, I, as a blind person, prefer to identify as blind first and not just person who is blind. I know that in the neurodivergent community, there is a lot of preference for the identity before the personhood. And really, just from a functional level, although sometimes it's legit, I think most of us mix it up, it gets really awkward because person first is not how we handle anything but disability. You don't generally say the woman who is gay or the man who is Jewish or the girl who is Black. You usually would use the identifier first. And like those other identities, It's not all of what defines us as people with disabilities, but it is a major part of our lives and it's part of our identities as people. And so we often want that included, especially if that's what we are specifically referring to.
So that takes us right to the continuation of that quote that we had from the National Center on Disability and Journalism. And it ends on a note here where it says, and so we're no longer offering advice regarding a default. Instead, we hope you'll double down to find out how people would like to be described. We'll also include some guidance, but again, we encourage you to confirm on a case-by-case basis. So what this means for you, if you're running usability research, is by all means, you should be asking. You need to ask your users. Another thing that you definitely want to do is pay attention how people talk about themselves and do some mirroring of how they speak about themselves. Take note of what type of language they use, whether it's identity first or person first, while they're speaking about themselves, and mirror how they do that. So moving right along, we have a few more tips on etiquette, and this is about using common terminology. So Amy, you want to take this?
Sure. So when we talk about common terminology for disability, there is a lot of stuff that is generally pretty much universal, at least here in the US. For instance, hey Bruno, did you see that movie last night?
I did. Did you see it?
I did. It was great. Or did you hear the gossip?
Is that what you heard?
Yes. Oh my goodness, isn't that great?
I'm a little embarrassed to talk about it.
Oh, I know, but it's so funny.
Did you read that book?
Absolutely. I saw you walking with your friend in the wheelchair the other day.
Yeah, we took a walk. We just had to take a breather, and just we walked around the campus a little bit and talked about things. It was great.
Good. So, I mean, end of the day, we're using the same language y'all are. And so it kind of gets uncomfortable and weird for you to want to try to think about it and for us to kind of deal with it when it's like, did you hear of that movie to someone who's blind? Or did you? No, we saw the movie. I mean, not visually, but whatever. That's the language that we're all using. We're just going to be just as happy and comfortable using the same language.
Yeah, don't make it weird. Don't pause and apologize. You're like, oh, I'm sorry, you didn't see the movie. What do I say? Don't be that person. Just talk like a human.
Yeah.
And again, like we mentioned before, something you'll definitely want to do in these cases is pay attention and mirror how somebody talks, and make sure that if there's anything that you notice about how they talk about themselves, that you run with that. So when you're talking about disability specifically, you might want to ask people how they identify. So like for yourself, Amy, like
Yeah, for me, I identify as a blind person. I do have some vision that I do use. So often if I need to make it clear that I may be doing something visually, I will say I'm a low vision person, but as I identify personally, I will probably just initially come out and tell you, hi, I'm a blind person, if that is relevant information, or if I'm writing about myself, for example. You will want to listen to how people represent themselves because, like I said, I call myself blind or low vision depending, but blind is my preference. You want to avoid, there's a lot of terms that get a bit weird. For example, in the blindness field, legal blindness is a very specific legal definition. Really, we don't care if you're legally blind unless we're Social Security or the DMV.
And if you want to get sincere user feedback, the last thing you want to evoke, the last vibe that you would want to go for is the SSA or a DMV, right? Like you want to elicit, warmth and real like sincerity from your users when you're researching and interviewing them. So definitely don't come off like you're the Social Security Administration or the DMV.
Don't worry, we will be most warm and sincere if you do.
Just maybe in a different way.
Yeah, maybe not the way you want. Might be a little more warm like a jalapeno than a warm hug.
That takes us right to some specific terms that you probably want to avoid if you're talking about disabilities. So
Mm-hmm.
one example would be wheelchair bound, or hearing impaired. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Wheelchair bound, you want to avoid terms like that because the person is not tied to the wheelchair. The wheelchair is a tool they are using. It gives them freedom, it gives them agency, ability to move through the world. It's not something that they are forced into. It's something that they're using to give them freedom. So you want to use terminology that shows that it's a tool being used. It is not a restraint on the person. Likewise with, well, not likewise, it's a very different topic, but there are terms that are just kind of out of fashion now for a lot of reasons. Hearing impaired tends not to be used as often as, say, hard of hearing or deaf, because it has gone out of favor partially because hearing impaired is kind of just icky.
It sounds kind of medical.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't sound very casual or personable.
Yeah. I mean, and if someone's using that terminology for themselves, that's a different issue. Then you mirror once again what they're doing. But by default, kind of the terminology that is common is going to be things more like hard of hearing or deaf for folks with who are deaf. Blind folks, a lot of us are using terms like blind. I've heard low vision more regularly, but I'm sure there are other terms people are still using. I'm not going to speak directly to that, except to say that personally, I've kind of taken that on when I need to explain further. But there are some words that pretty much anyone in the disability community is going to like shrink back a bit.
Some terms you definitely want to avoid. And we have a little symbol on the screen, like the known smoking symbol, like don't do this.
So one of the big ones, handicap. Unless you are specifically referring to a law or a place that is dealing specifically, that is using that terminology still, I cannot think of anyone I know personally in the disability community that would prefer or actively use the word handicap to refer to their disability. I just haven't seen it. It may exist, but I don't know. I would avoid it. Others that are uncomfortable tend to be the kind of thing that is inspirational or softens disability. Differently abled, special needs, handicapable. Please, I will get down on my knees for this one. Never say handicapable. It's just bad. It feels kind of infantilizing. It's kind of disregarding our lived experience. A lot of us have grown to, and I once again can't say everyone, but a lot of us have grown to feel that our disability is something that we are proud to identify with because it is part of who we are. And we're proud of the things we are doing as we live in the world. And that's just as much a part of us as our race or our gender or a lot of other expressions that are just part of us, characteristics. So using that language tends to be friendlier.
Yeah, and I would be remiss if I didn't at least call back to Merrill Evans yesterday, saying don't make assumptions, right? Like with all of the things we've been telling you, the number one takeaway should be that you should be asking your users first and paying attention to how they talk about themselves. These are just some like general guidelines. Maybe those people exist, like he mentioned. They may be rare, but they might be out there. So always ask. Similarly, we want to talk a little bit about some interactions, especially if you're going to be doing research and you want to ask some pointed questions about some that you want to bring to your team with some real takeaways. So there's some tips about that, right? Like for example, you'd want to ask about how the person uses their tools rather than go on to lengthy discussions about their diagnoses or what they can and can't do, right? So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. Very simply, medical history can be a real touchy subject. A lot of people feel that's private. It does not matter to you how I ended up developing this disability, whatever it is. That's mine, not yours. And frankly, there's some folks like me who I will gladly tell you. However, do you have half an hour for me to explain all the nuances? Or would you like to get onto the user research? Because if we want to get onto the user research, we care about the tools they are using and the ways that they interact with our product, which means, how do you do this thing? How do you visit that website? What tools are you using to access this experience in the world? And in the same way, it's very muddy when you ask about someone's capabilities. First of all, capabilities change. One day my eye is much fuzzier than another. One day I might read print, another day there's no chance on earth. And trying to get all of that kind of concisely down isn't going to help you nearly as much as, oh yeah, I'm a JAWS user most of the time, though sometimes I use Windows high contrast mode and smart invert or dark mode on my smartphone.
Yeah, so for the researcher, some takeaways from that is, don't focus on asking stuff about the person's condition. Ask more about the tools that they use and what you really want to take away to your team. So, and you'd want to ask questions like, tell me a little bit about what tools you use to access the web or web apps or your phone. Tell me about some of the settings that you use. Or if you're about to show them a prototype, you might ask something like, explain your experience communicating in an environment like this that I'm about to show you. So you would want to shy away from asking like really pointed questions about someone's medical history or how they got to where they were, because it's just not going to be relevant to your study and it's not going to give you actionable takeaways when you're designing things.
And honestly, it's going to waste your time. Even if the person wants to explain it, it's just too generalized and not focused on where you want to be. And it can make conversations really uncomfortable.
Indeed. So that takes us to our next section. We're going to talk a little bit about planning your inclusive user research. If you know a little bit about how to talk internally at your company about this topic, you might start bringing this up and you might even convince somebody that you should be doing some research and then they'll go along with it.
Nothing about us without us.
Absolutely. And so the idea would be, well, really, we also heard yesterday, nothing without us, period, right? Like, I like that takeaway from yesterday that whether it's about us or not, nothing without us, right? Like, always include people. That's a really good takeaway. So maybe you've convinced someone, or maybe you need help convincing somebody because you're in the really early stages. So that's what we're going to be focusing on now. The biggest point that we want you to take away here is that you should be doing this research as early as possible. So the best time would be right when that light bulb goes off in someone's head and they first conceived of the idea, because you don't want to build it on shaky foundations. You don't want that idea to develop through multiple phases of development when it didn't make sense in the first place. So the earlier you do the research, like with all UX research, the better. This is especially true if it's hardware products. We've seen a lot of hardware products out there looking to serve the disability community that frankly just come out of nowhere and then flop because they're not really solving a problem. So tell us a little bit about some of those things, Amy.
Absolutely. One kind of famous example within the blindness community is all of the folks that want to build the replacement for the guide dog or the white cane. I have heard of, though never actually got to see, a prototype that someone came in with once that looked like a hula skirt with little vibro tactile whiskers that someone would wear out around themselves. Think of a big ball gown looking thing, so that it would hit the table in front of me before I did. And it's like, that is not my look. Not to mention, I am still going to go tumbling down those stairs. Likewise, you're looking at a lot of the vibrotactile canes that are happening right now. And yeah, they might fix a few minor things, like maybe what's above you, but maybe not. If it's raining, You've also got issues like the weight of a cane that has that kind of electronics in it. We're using that all the time. There's some of us who are already dealing with things like carpal tunnel. We don't want to increase that percentage in the population. And they're expensive. You break one of those, you're out a few $100s. I break my cane, I'm out $50. So you really want to make sure that what you are using and what you are creating is actually going to serve that community. And if it's a general concept that's going out for everyone, you want to make sure that you are getting folks who are disabled in early so that we can help you think through the snags in your process.
So we're going to talk a little bit about some recent and old developments from some famous software companies and hardware companies. So one really good example of a bad hardware decision that a tech company recently made was Microsoft with their Windows laptops. They're talking about replacing the very important applications, or what a lot of people call the menu or the right-click key, which is something that is crucial to keyboard users. They're talking about replacing that with the AI Copilot key and making that a requirement for making a Windows branded laptop. So that would mean that anybody that's a primary keyboard user is going to have a much rougher time using that laptop than normally they would have. You know, this is something that has decades of precedence, and that is a really useful key. Just talking about like the usability principle of recognition over recall. You want your users to be able to look at a list of what is possible rather than force them to remember every single possibility. That's just a very basic, you know, design heuristic. So if you take away that key, that gives them contextual options and tells them what they can do in any given context, depending on what they're focused on. Now you're forcing them to remember every single keystroke, right? Rather than just hitting that key and then seeing, oh, I can copy, paste, select all. Now they're going to have to remember, this is just a general example, they probably know how to copy, paste, and select all, but sometimes you don't know what fields you can do it in, right? And just right-clicking it gives you a little bit of that context. So now you can't do that because some marketing team decided that you need to replace that key with an AI Copilot.
Want to thank Corb for bringing that one up on a LinkedIn article, because it's banger and it helped me to figure out, because I'll tell you what, as someone who is a primary screen reader user and keyboard user and has ADHD, remembering all 827 commands that I'm supposed to know to get through my day efficiently ain't going to happen. And trying to hit the function key and the shift key and F10 means that my fingers are all off the home row. So you're slowing me down a lot. And that's not even beginning to talk about if you have mobility challenges that mean that moving your hand to the upper level is going to be more difficult. It's just bad all the way around.
Similarly, there's another idea from the usually pretty okay about accessibility, Apple. This is something that's lingered for decades now, and it's kind of baffling. It's hard to explain why they haven't changed this yet, but except for that, maybe they decided a long time ago, clearly without consulting all of their users, and that is that you have to explicitly turn on full keyboard access on your Mac. So both in the OS and in the browser. So if you want to fully use your Mac with a keyboard, you have to go into two separate places in your settings and turn that on. And well, if you can't use a keyboard, how are you even going to do that? And so that's a really good example of like, there's no way that they consulted users with disabilities early on in that process. And so this bad design lingers and continues to be costly for them because they have to deal with escalations and customer complaints, and they have to constantly remind people and teach people how to do this very difficult to do thing.
And we're stuck with designers who have occasionally never even realized that you could tab through a web page.
Yes, I have to thank Apple for this. Now when I'm training our teams internally, and I'm saying, oh, you could just use your tab key to test if what you just coded works or doesn't for a keyboard user, I have team members that will go, oh, I didn't know I could do that. And then I'll go, oh, right, probably didn't even turn it on. So I have to go and send them the article that teaches them how to turn on this very basic feature. And that means that also gives me a twinge of like pain, because now I know that that developer for the past however long they've been working has never done that. So everything that they built has this issue in it. So let's thank Apple for that one. So we also have some good case studies. You want to go into those, Amy?
Absolutely. There are moments where something has been built from the ground up by the disability community in partnership with other organizations, other inventors. One that I am still incredibly excited by and kind of proud of is the KNFB reader. In the kind of early 2000s, late 90s, as someone who's blind and wanted to read a piece of print media, we'd have to use a standalone scanning platform with either a computer or a truly standalone solution that's going to be big and bulky and not leave your desk. And that was better than not having anything, but it wasn't as good as we could have it. And so the National Federation of the Blind worked with Ray Kurzweil to develop software and come up with a hardware solution that allowed for the creation of the first generation KNFB reader, which literally ended up being the specialized software loaded onto a PDA, stuck to a breadboard with some circuitry on it, stuck to a camera. And then there were things like, how do we make this thing something that can be taught to the end user so that they can get a good focused picture of whatever they're taking? And that development continued until the KNFB Reader mobile app was able to be created for smartphones. And, you know, meaningfully now, that leadership has led there being a number of excellent solutions out there for reading printed text as a blind person using your smartphone that's portable. There's multiple options out there that are, you know, really have surpassed the KNFB Reader mobile app in ability, but that's because that whole process was started by people in the community expressing a need and working with partners who could make it happen. Likewise, one of the biggest things for me in college, I happened to, and now I'm proving my age, be there right at the beginning of Bookshare, when it was primarily people with print disabilities actually scanning and uploading books to the service. And it was scanned stuff from the community that we were then able to share to one another in order to access books without each of us having to scan War and Peace or whatever the giant anatomy textbook was. Only one of us did it, and then we could all share that information. And that has grown in such a way that today we have publishers who are making sure that Bookshare can ingest that material, and it's available to all sorts of folks who have print disabilities to get those books in a format that they can read, whether that be reading it on a portable braille display, enlarged, listening to it, choosing a specific font or color set. And that's all because the community was involved from the ground up.
Another reason you might want to bring people in early, this is something that Sherry Byrne-Haber always talks about, and I stole from her talk with her permission, is that there's sort of like a rule of thumb that you can think about the costs of how just insanely costly it becomes to not research early. So if you can imagine an accessibility issue that you would normally catch at the requirements phase, like we recommended, you know, as soon as that light bulb goes off, as soon as someone comes up with a concept, at that stage, it might just be a single line item in a bulleted list, right? Glancing at that and saying, no, that doesn't make a lot of sense, costs very little. And it costs very little to just highlight that one line in a bulleted list and hit the delete key. It could maybe cost just $1, right, of someone's time. Now, if that same little idea gets kicked up to the design phase, now you have a designer spinning their wheels on this sort of flawed idea, that might take them, maybe a few minutes to come up with a design, maybe a few hours, whatever the case is. But what would have normally have, cost you $1 to just delete a line item, now you're saying, oh, and there's been a lot of time spent designing it, the actual solution. So if you catch it there, good. Maybe it's something that costs you only $10 to catch. If you kick that further up the chain, now you've got people coding that flawed idea that your designer created. That might cost, maybe $100 of a developer's time, because they're spending, developers are problem solvers. So even if you give them a flawed problem, they're gonna chomp at the bit to figure out the best way to do it. And so, something that could have been $1 is now 100. Likewise, you kick it down the road to testers. If you have a good ratio, you probably have a few more QAs than you do even developers. And now you've got multiple people all spinning their wheels and wasting their time on something that is fundamentally flawed. Hopefully, during that testing phase, and Amy and I painfully do a lot of that testing a lot of the time. Our colleague Becky here can attest to that too. We all end up catching things far too late sometimes. But yeah, it's painful. It takes a lot of time, and it wastes everyone's precious time. But if you can imagine, then it's something that doesn't even come to us, that just goes straight into production. Now you're also spending money on deploying it, right? Like somebody has to figure out how to put that up on a server somewhere. Someone has to figure out how to sell it to the customers. Now you've got customers out there actually using it and figuring out that it doesn't actually work for their disabled employees, for example, right? And then now you have to involve support. We have tech support people handling those issues. Then the three of us will have to get called into a support call to help the customer be reassured that we actually do have people that understand users with disabilities and that we are working on it, right? And at that point, you've involved so many people and so many hours of so much of their time, that what could have just been that quick delete key of the one bulleted list item is now, easily $10,000 that you've been spending on this, or way more. I mean, if it's in production, that's
Yeah, if it's in production, you're lucky if all you get's a nasty RAM. Unfortunately, we are all aware that right now we're in kind of a litigious place when it comes to accessibility. And sometimes that is, for us as a disabled user, the best tool that we have to make change. But I don't want to have to go that route with you. That's exhausting for me. It's exhausting for you. I don't want to be your adversary. I want to be your partner. So, it's something that none of us want to dwell on, but is a reality that we have to be aware of. If things get out there, that's a reality that can happen if you're not showing the humility and awareness, which I think takes us to our next point, doesn't it?
Sure, I think we're moving on now to
Or did I miss a page?
we're still planning and places to find users.
Oh
with
yeah,
disabilities.
I missed a whole chunk. Look at me go.
But yeah, if you're at the point where you're able to do this testing at whatever phase you're in, you're gonna need users, right? So to help you plan that, we have listed out here of, people with disabilities exist, right? Disabled users are out there. That's not a valid excuse that they're hard to find or any of this. So if you ever hear that, just you're going to be able to download this slide deck. All of these things here are links. So the first thing that we absolutely have to mention on here is that Nobility, our gracious hosts, they actually have a whole program around this called AccessWorks. So I don't want to, be rude and not mention our hosts. They're very good at this. So you can reach out to them directly and find users for your tests. Likewise, there's lots of consumer organizations.
Consumer organizations of people with disabilities are going to be some great resources for you, because they have the same goal you do of making sure that the tool is going to be accessible to their membership. What we have on the slide, I need to tell you right now, is not everybody. These are representative samples. What we've got on the slide includes places like the National Federation of the Blind, National Association of the Deaf, Autism Self-Advocacy Network, um,
ADA.
ADA, the Attention Deficit Disorder Association. Those are all organizations that, to my knowledge, with the possible exception, though I believe this is true of the National Association of the Deaf, are people who are of the community and are not being spoken for by advocates, but are actually community members within the disability organizations. To my knowledge, NAD is also that. I just don't know that organization as well as some of the others.
Likewise, we also have those agencies that directly serve communities. So
Lighthouse for the Blind in San Francisco will set up user testing. Centers for Independent Living, and in this case, I just mentioned the Boston SIL. You may even be able to work with organizations that do vocational rehab, may be willing to send out emails on your behalf to some of their clients who may be willing to work with you. Beyond that, if you know the kind of tools that your users might be using, like if you're looking for screen reader users, you can check for things like Reddit forums or mailing lists for people who are JAWS users or voiceover users. And speaking of voiceover users, one of the biggest communities out there right now that's really an easy one if what you're looking for is visual and non-visual access to Apple products is going to be the AppleVis website and the community that's built around that. And, you know, here's the other thing. If you have shown me that you care about accessibility by giving me information about your accessibility on your webpage or through other resources, I will likely contact you. Like, we have accessibility at UKG. .org. And so if I'm having a problem, I feel more confident that if I send something off to accessibility email, someone will know what I'm talking about and may be willing and able to help me. Whereas if I send it to support@yourgreatapp.com, I have no idea if anyone's going to even know what a screen reader is. And I may not bother. I may just move off and not care about yourgreatestapp.com and go over to this other thing that kind of works.biz.
Shout out to Becky for filtering through all our accessibility at UKG emails. Thank you, Becky. Oh, yes, we have a question. Oh, where's our microphone? Just want to make sure everybody online can hear as well.
Yeah.
When it comes to user research, like who to be involved. So everybody's different, obviously, and different disabilities are different. I work with clients who they want user research done. They don't necessarily know who needs to be involved in it. They just know that it's important to make sure that their website gets verified by real users. So what kind of cross-section should we be including in our panel of user, a panel of users? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I would say as wide as possible, and where things are going to be challenging, start with the largest population that may encompass smaller populations. For instance, if you've got, if you want to make sure that your base level is keyboard accessibility, you have gone a long way, though not the whole way, towards screen reader accessibility. If you have looked at, if you are looking at some of the mid-level vision issues, you're going to catch a lot of people because there's going to be a whole lot of folks who have, frankly, poor devices where color contrast is going to be much worse. You're going to have folks who are just a little older and, oh, that text is so small. You know, part of the disability community doesn't even know that we have disabilities. So I'd say find the wide swaths and find a few examples of folks who are going further.
A good resource to just kind of uncover what some of those types of users might be is the W3C. They have a series of really short videos highlighting different use cases for people with disabilities interacting with the web or with apps. And I think it's maybe just 10 or so like less than 2-minute videos. Like they're really brief videos that your product designers and your product managers should definitely take a glance at and see, oh, this might be relevant to what we're building. I forget exactly what the series of videos.
Accessibility perspectives.
Accessibility perspectives. That's the series. That's if your team is just very naive and hasn't really looked into disability issues before, that would be a really good starting place. The W3C's perspectives. It's a really good starting point. And then from there, you could see, you know, oh, wow, this might actually impact somebody with a mobility issue, or, oh, that's something that would definitely be a problem for a low vision user. You know, you could just see these little perspectives videos and it might, you know, turn on some light bulbs in your head about who you want to research. And then you can refer to this list and find those people. Oh, we have another question.
So I've known that user testing is super important. I want to start doing it in my company, but I haven't. What's the way to approach these companies? Like if I want to talk to the National Federation of the Blind, how do I actually phrase what I'm looking for and what sort of response should I expect?
The organizations are going to offer different levels of support. I will admit, some of these folks, I've not even checked whether or not they would pass things along, but I can explain how it works some for both the National Federation of the Blind and the San Francisco Lighthouse, because I worked in both of those places previously. The NFB is willing to send out research proposals that are mostly pure research and willing to work with developers for a bit of a fee to help build up actual testing cohorts where they would help to actually find the people. There are a number of different levels of kind of involvement you can get from a lot of the consumer groups like that. Same way with the Lighthouse, you can actually have them do a lot of the facilitation of finding people. You can actually have them be the local host for your user research, where you would bring folks into the Lighthouse itself. And they would help you to find the people, bring them in, host them, and you could ask your questions, and they can help you with things that we'll talk about in the next section, where it's how do you kind of make this experience as pleasant for everyone as possible.
And if you're looking for just like a turnkey solution where everything's kind of just figured out and they'll help you get to directly what you're looking for, I'll mention again, AccessWorks does exactly that. So Knowbility has those resources, and that's why they're here, and that's what they do. So they'd be very excited to help you with that.
Yeah. And with some groups, you're going to put out this is what I want, this is who I need. And they may just be willing to forward your email out to the community. Someone like AppleVis, you could post on their forums yourself as the developer and explain what's needed and seek.
Amy mentioned a little bit of the cost of doing this, and I just want to remind you that doing this stuff does cost money. But again, it's an investment that's going to save you money in the long run if you consider that slide I showed earlier. So that brings us to a very important point, and that is you absolutely must compensate your usability and accessibility testers.
I have a life like all y'all. I'm not doing this for free. This is not my gig unless you're offering to pay, in which case, let's talk.
And yeah, and if you want to get that sort of like sincere feedback from someone who's very willing and excited to be working with you, you're much more likely to get good quality results if you're paying people. It doesn't take much. You don't have to like spend billions of dollars on this research, but just a little gesture goes a long way. We've done usability studies where, you know, we give people like a $50 gift card or something like that. It's just a matter of trusting in their experiences and respecting their time and respecting who they are as people, and just acknowledging that, you know, their experiences aren't just there to inform your designs. They're human beings, and you want to be considerate of them like you would any of your other users.
Yep.
So that takes us to the next phase of usability studies, and that's the actual facilitation. So this is part 3, inclusive user research facilitation. The subtitle here is Transparency and Humility Make Me More Understanding.
Mhm.
So speaking of that,
Yes.
if you're on your accessibility journey, wherever you're at in what phase of design, like you were just very upfront with us now, I, wanted to do this, but I haven't done it yet. So, be gentle with me or what have you.
Yeah.
Just being sincere like that goes a long way.
And honestly, everyone here in this room and on Zoom, I'd like to briefly, honestly applaud you because you are here, you are doing the work, you are wanting to learn more. And that in itself is a good first step. Following that first step is, of course, the second step, which is know where you are, work on learning where you're at and what the next steps are, and make that information available to me as the end user or as the participant in your study so that I know that you're serious about this and that you're learning and that you're working toward a real solution.
Mhm.
Roadmaps are going to make a big difference to my understanding of we are still having real problems in this area. We are hoping to fix it in Q2 of next year. Gives me an understanding that you have an idea of how you're getting there.
And that you're just actually making a commitment, and this isn't just, sort of like a shot in the dark, that you're really going to take this and do something with it. People respond to that.
I
And
swear I'm really serious about accessibility.org is not enough.
Yeah, increasingly, at least in our case at UKG, we find that our customers, I mean, they're spending a lot of money on our software. So increasingly, when they come to us with accessibility concerns, they're asking for roadmaps. It's not enough for us to tell them, oh, this doesn't work. They're like, okay, that's fine. We'll work with you on that. When will it work? And, just having that sincere conversation about, where you're at is very important as a first step, but you're going to want to take that farther and say, we're planning to do this in the future. We're planning to do that. People want to know. And one thing you definitely don't want to do when you're researching or talking to your users with disabilities is decide for them what they should and shouldn't care about.
I get real cranky if someone tells me, oh, you don't need to worry about that setting. It's not important. If it's not important, why is it there? It's kind of, infantilizing. Like, who says it isn't important? Maybe I am the one person in the world that wants to use Markdown on your webpage.
It's like, oh, why would blind users want to use photo features or something? Just don't be that person, Don't decide for your users what they care about. Ask them what they care about. Ask what they care about.
Yeah.
So transparency and humility, like how you might show that is just talking like a human. So an example, and this is all, jargon is very bad. You would definitely want to avoid jargon when you're talking to your users. And the following word salad is all terms I have actually heard coming from our company at different times, right? Like you wouldn't want to say stuff like UKG makes a B2B SaaS HCM suite for a variety of market segments from SMB to large enterprise. We drive engagement, right? You wouldn't want to be that person. So you want to turn that into English. You want to talk to your users in a way that they understand, right? You want to say UKG makes online software that lets companies provide a way for their employees to request time off, view pay stubs, sign up for benefits, and other critical workplace tasks. It also helps managers and admins keep those things operating smoothly, right? If you can avoid sounding like you're marketing your software during your testing at all costs, you're going to get much more sincere and honest and useful feedback.
Honestly, I've worked there for 2 years and I'm not sure I know what all of the things in the first paragraph mean.
I've worked there for 16 years and I don't know what most of that means. So don't be that person. Don't. The takeaway here is that just be honest about what your software does and talk in human words. Research is absolutely not the time to be marketing or overselling your solutions. If anything, you want to undersell. If anything, you want to be really honest, like we said earlier, about what what your blind spots are, what you're missing out on, what you haven't done yet, because that's how you're going to get better feedback, because then the people know what to focus on.
Mhm.
So moving on, practically speaking, if you're going to be doing this user research about accessibility, you're going to want to make sure that the research process itself is accessible. So, right, if you're doing an interview, like on-site interview, make sure that the space is accessible, right?
Mhm.
If you're gonna bring people in, make sure that there's space for wheelchair users to come into your space. Don't have them, be like, oh, okay, we're gonna be meeting in meeting room 103, and then they get to meeting room 103 and they can't even fit their chair through it. Don't be
Or-
that person, right?
Or it's up 2 flights of stairs in this gorgeous old brownstone with no elevator.
Exactly.
Um, you might benefit from variable lighting for some of your low vision users, or, and that's spatial things.
Mhm.
But digitally, you want to be thinking about this too. You want to make sure that things like your NDA is something that can be read electronically, signed electronically, possibly, because neither you nor I want you to spend 15 of our 45 minutes reading the NDA to me and then me having to try and figure out where to sign the thing. It not a good vibe, and you'll never get the people if they can't use your survey in the first place.
Mhm. Sometimes we have online pre-surveys or screening surveys to find the users and make sure that the people that are coming in will be able to give us the feedback that we want. If the platform that you're using to put up that survey isn't accessible, well, then you just missed out on a really good opportunity to actually find real users, right?
Mhm.
Similarly, we talked about the importance of paying people. If you end up using a digital payment platform to give people gift cards, or if you're sending them, some whatever Disney dollars are out there, like Amazon Cash or whatever, you're gonna want to make sure that the whatever platform you're using is actually accessible, right? You want to
Mhm.
actually look at your research process from top to bottom and make sure that you're not leaving anyone out. Otherwise, you're going to miss out on really good feedback.
Right.
Um, while you're testing, and if you just trust in the idea that you don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
You're going to want to always ask people things. If there's any way that you can make it more accommodating for them, if there's anything that you might have missed, give people the opportunity to give you the feedback, even about the process itself, or
Mhm.
just a sincere question of, is there anything you might need to access this test? You're going to be using a prototype in a web browser. What might you need for that? Just ask, because there might be, you don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
So even if you end up creating something that has some of these gaps, just asking people gives them the opportunity to fill in those gaps. So you might have
Yep.
made a mistake, and that's fine. But if you're not asking, you just wouldn't know. So ask. Always ask your users.
Always ask, and remember the progress over perfection thing. That's true for anything that we're doing ourselves. Once again, I'm going to be much more understanding if you offer, hey, is there anything that we didn't think about in this process that's going to make it easier for you? You have just won my heart. Because you know what? We're not going to get it perfect. There are huge swaths of the disability community with unique needs. And sometimes we're going to miss something, or sometimes something that makes something more accessible for one group might make it less for another. And it's not going to be perfect. We understand that. But that is really ameliorated when you say, hey, is there a way we can make this better?
That brings us right to our next point, which is, um, people with disabilities are not a monolith. There's some things you want to consider when there's maybe people have different histories or journeys about how they got to where they are, and you want to ask about those things. Again, like we mentioned earlier, you don't want to focus on like a history or like medical details, but you want to ask open-ended questions to kind of arrive at how people navigate the world, so that you can be sensitive to it. You want to take a little bit about this, about
Sure.
the spectrum of experience?
There's going to be a complete and utter spectrum, just like Every other segment of the population, disability is approximately 20% of the population across the world. So you're going to find rich people, poor people, people who are just learning a piece of technology, people who are developers or coders and can run rings around you as the researcher. And you're going to find everything in between. You're going to find young folks or folks who were born with their disability, folks to whom it came later, folks with all different skill levels. So remembering that we are not a monolith in any way, shape, or form is going to take you far.
And so some takeaways related to that. As a researcher, when you're actually facilitating these studies, try to get to know your users as people to get that sincere feedback. Don't just collect like usability data, but get at some ethnography as well. Ask the questions around the software use and understand sort of like how they're using it in a bigger context. And the best way to do that is to ask open-ended questions. So like I mentioned earlier, you don't know what you don't know. So give people the opening, give people the opportunity to tell you things that you don't know. And how that might manifest really practically in a research study, just speaking from the perspective of facilitating and designing those studies, is don't lean just on multiple choice questions, or don't always lean on sort of Likert scale things like a lot of researchers do. They give you good data, but they don't tell the whole story, right? It's good to collect that data, but you need to supplement that with some really more open-ended ethnographic questions. And so a lot of times I found that when we have research study results, the things that really stand out to the rest of the team, where the takeaways that they really learn from, tend to be, yes, they care a lot about the data, but most of the times the good quotes that you're going to get, like sometimes you get a slide deck about your research results. Sometimes when you get those really good quotables that take up a full slide and you're like, this is exactly how our users feel. You're not going to get that stuff if you focus on just the raw data and the multiple choice questions. You have to make room for that. So make sure you lean on the humanity of your users to get that really good feedback that will actually change how your team thinks. We talked a little bit about that, and that applies to technology as well. Make sure that if you're going to be testing like a working prototype of something, that you don't limit the technology that it works with. That probably means that you're getting ahead of yourself and you're forcing your usability testers to do QA for you, right? So for example, if you're going to be testing a working prototype, don't, come to Amy and say, well, you can only use, JAWS version, X, and you can only use that with Chrome version Y. And that's the only way we're going to be listening to your feedback.
Well, that's too bad. All I've got with me is a smartphone with voiceover. So now what do we do?
Yeah, you just missed out on an opportunity. I mean, it's okay to tell your users what you've been testing on. But if you're saying to people, well, this is only going to work in this scenario, that's probably not a good place to start. And that means you probably should have been testing a little further back in the process rather than trying to test like a working prototype or a piece of code that's been made already.
Well, and to be honest here, this is where the scope of what you're doing generally is going to be important. Because I mean, if you're an iOS app, then I understand that the only way I'm going to be able to use you is on an iPhone or an iPad with voiceover. But if you are multi-platform web, I'm going to be awfully upset if I can't use voiceover or can't use TalkBack and have to use a specific screen reader on Windows and maybe even a browser I don't use. That's a completely different animal if everyone else can use it and I can only use it in one way. Functionally, there's going to be a lot of problems with that. A lot of folks don't know multiple things. They may not be able to afford multiple devices. And even for those of us who can, you have lost a lot of credibility.
For sure. I'm going to skip a slide or two because I think we've covered these topics already. Yep. So yeah, this takes us to, going back further in the design process. And instead of testing with only thinking of accessibility testing as something that you can do with working prototype code is don't neglect to do research in the design phase, right? You can absolutely test a design for accessibility, including for blind people. You don't have to wait until you have a fully built solution that they get in front of with their screen reader. So how might you do that, right? Like if you have a design that's already been figured out, you know, visually, there's a layout, there's some copy that some designer has written. You can provide text-based alternatives for your users, right? Something as simple as taking a prototype that's like a few form fields and a submit button, for example, let's say, and just turning that into like a text document that just says, you know, you've got a first name field, a last name field, a button labeled send, you know, what have you. That's a really low technology, low effort way to take what's been created as a visual design and to be able to put it in front of a blind user and get real feedback on your wording choices, the order of the form fields, if it actually makes sense to be collecting that type of data for the task that they want to complete, right? There is no excuse to not be doing this stuff. There's very low effort, low, low technology ways to get at that data. And what that might mean is, as a researcher, you might have to take on the responsibility of learning how to talk about this stuff. So that just might mean talking about interactions more open-ended. So for example, don't be really technical with your language. Don't go to your users and say, oh, there's a select menu here with these options, because depending on what technology they use, maybe they call select menus
Pop-up,
pop-up buttons or
combo box,
There's
drop down.
there's all of these words that mean the same thing, and everybody uses a different one depending on what technology they're coming from and what history they have. So just learn to talk about these things in a more general way. Instead of saying there's a select menu or a pop-up button, say, here you have a field that will allow you to select from a few choices. This is the label, these are the choices, right? And that is a way of conveying it in a way that everyone will understand and that you're going to be able to focus on the actual feedback for the design. And this is all stuff you can do before you ever code something and find out way later down the line that you used the wrong component or what have you, right? You can focus on the wording and the choices themselves. And that also allows you as a researcher to have a backup plan. There's going to be software bugs. Screen sharing might break down as it always does. Or your participant just might be having a bad day. Amy, you want to maybe give us an example of that or just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it is possible that your user may have come in and their computer isn't going to work and they were the ones with the screen reader on it. So you may be describing this option for them. There may be situations where you don't have a precise prototype, but you could lay something out. I taught people years ago, this is admittedly a little bit of a side story, but I taught students who had never really used Windows before how the Windows desktop was laid out using Lego. And it was able to give them an understanding of some of the commands they would use, because if you're using insert F12, you get the time and date. Insert F11, you get the things in the system tray. And one of my students is like, well, does that mean if I use insert F10, I get the things on the taskbar? And I'm like, you should try that. And of course it worked. So sometimes if all you've got is a very simple layout prototype for someone to look at that can be made pretty easily, that'll still make a big difference. But having a lot of those kind of open-ended troubleshooting, problem-solving things in the back of your mind for if something's not working will let you continue if things have otherwise gone sideways. Or even if you don't know yet how to get there, you can bring your users in really early and have them help you figure out how would we get there. One of those real high-level etiquette things. Couple of things to keep in mind when working with someone with disabilities. If you think that they might want assistance, feel free to ask. Would you like to take my arm? Is there a way that I can help out? And do not get upset if they say no, because they have figured out how they're going to do it and they're set. I might regularly say, no, I don't need to take your arm. I'd just like to walk with you. In the same vein, don't touch without express permission. This is going to be true of devices, doubly true of service animals, and triply true of the person themselves. You do not want to grab somebody's wheelchair and move them at all without express permission from the user. And I've known folks who have dreamt of spiked padding for the people who are wanting to be too helpful on the train platform.
And that can manifest even digitally as well. Like if you're
Mhm.
doing a Zoom research call, right? If someone is struggling with a task, don't be like, okay, I'm gonna, take over screen recording control and just click on that for you or something like that.
It's okay to ask. It is not okay to just do. And it's not okay to just say, I'm going to do. And if they say, hey, yeah, please just fix that, go for it. But make sure you get that permission first. And especially when you're dealing with like service animals, do your best to ignore the service animal. Because if you're paying attention to it, it may be paying attention to you, and then it's not doing its job, which means that it might get in trouble and your participant might get hurt. And none of us want any of that.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
now we can continue.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up because we kind of flew past it. Sorry, guys. Okay, yeah, I think that does. Now we actually have covered everything.
Okie dokie, that was the end of their presentation. I'm going to invite Bruno and Amy to join us up here. And you can put questions and answers in the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand if you'd like to ask your question yourself. And let me get Amy.
I just want to say thanks while everybody's getting their questions lined up. And first of all, thanks to Amy and Bruno for coming to Access U. We had a blast. I don't know if you were here when we shared your photo from the happy hour, from the unicorn happy hour. Great photo and great time having you there. And then also for giving us permission to rebroadcast and invite people to learn from your experience without having had the opportunity to go to Access U. So thank you both so much for being here.
It was
Absolutely.
absolutely a pleasure.
Okay, well, the questions are coming in, so I'm gonna let Mark go ahead and monitor that and be the MC.
Okay, well, we've got one in the chat. Are there any accessibility concerns when it comes to scrolling down longer websites versus shorter websites?
One thing you want to definitely be aware of is infinite scroll is going to cause problems for anything that is beyond that infinite point.
Absolutely.
Because if you infinite scroll, the keyboard user, the screen reader user is not going to be able to get to anything beyond it. And personally, I do not enjoy having everything on a web page, especially a long page, cut off. Like Amazon reviews, you get the first 4 or 5 sentences of a review, and then you have to hit the more button, and then you've got to go back to the last one and forward again. Being able to expand collapse is really nice at some points. That is my personal preference. I would recommend you go out and talk to lots more users about that kind of thing. And the long versus short page, one thing that's going to make that much better for your users is if you have good heading structure that is both visually conveys what's going on and is significant from the word is escaping me. It's actual heading structure. It's not just bigger text. Yeah,
Yep,
the word
like
has just
you want to
left.
make sure it's marked up correctly, right? You want to make sure
Yes.
it's coded correctly, essentially. If you, for the first part of this is you definitely want to make sure that if you have long pages, that they have headings to help users get through them and understand the structure and the organization of them. And yes, Landon said here, semantic. That's the perfect word for that.
Thank
You want to
you.
make sure that the person is getting the semantics of what you intended that heading to mean. So first level is yes, you need to have headings. Second level is they need to be coded correctly so that everybody's experiencing them the same way. Um, so again, there's no like hard and fast rule about like you can't or can't have long pages. It's just a matter of knowing how to build pages. And if you're doing user research and you're being inclusive in that research, you're for sure going to find out what users like and don't like about your long page or your short page, right? Like if you have a page that's too short because you're using infinite scroll to constantly reveal what they're there to see, or if you're on a really long page that's truncating everything and they're having to also similarly interact with it too much. If you open it up to your users, you're definitely going to get that feedback. So there's no hard and fast rule. There's no right and wrong. It's just a matter of applying what's correct for your needs of your user and then giving them the opportunity to give you feedback about it and keeping things open-ended.
Hmm. And ideally making things relatively easy for the person to chunk. So shorter paragraphs, bulleted lists, um, lists of links that are clear, things that will give people enough kind of space to separate out things, skim easily. As long as you've got semantic paragraphs, I can jump from paragraph to paragraph with my screen reader as easily as I can heading to heading. So I've got a lot of granularity available to read things, and that also makes it easier for most of your users to skim and find what they need. So
Just a reminder, you can put your questions in the chat, the Q&A, or you can raise your hand. We'll let you ask live. The next question is from Erly. What are your thoughts about recruiting participants based on different experience levels with assistive tech? For example, learning to expert.
Great question.
Yeah. Do you want to go first, Bruno?
Oh, go ahead, Amy, you first.
Um, I think that that is fabulous because your user base is probably going to be across that board. Uh, a few years ago, when I was working for the NFB, we were pulled in to look at a web page that our team had reviewed and found to be really excellent as far as its accessibility. Our team are all expert users. The people that we brought on were, I would say, moderate and even some fairly beginning or learner users. And they had a very difficult time with this page that we found to be absolutely fantastic. And that is because although it hit all the major points, it was doing things in ways that our learners and our intermediate users were unfamiliar with. The patterns changed from what they've been familiar with since they started using screen readers. So where possible, get a wide swath. I mean, if everyone that you're working with is going to be of a similar expected level, then it may make sense to narrow down, but where possible, a wide path is going to be best because you'll find that the expert user has ideas that may help with everyone, and that's also true for your beginning user. and they will each provide unique context to help you understand where the challenges lie.
Yeah, and I think that yeah, you should by all means be aware of the expertise level of your users when it comes to technology, not just their assistive technology, but technology in general. So something that we add onto the beginning of our research studies is to ask people a general comfort level with technology, whether that be with assistive tech or not, and also how proficient they are with their assistive tech by their own, how by their own perception, what they feel like. And I think that helps you understand a lot. And then, like we mentioned in the talk, you don't want to just collect very pointed data. You also want to give people to you want to create open-ended situations to collect data. So one of the ways that we do that too is to ask people, what are some of your most used websites or some things that you do on the web a lot? Some tasks that you perform frequently, some of the hobbies that you like taking part of. And that gives you a little bit of a view into their day-to-day life and how they use the web and some of the things they do more often. So if they tell you that they're, trading stocks or something very like fiddly and advanced with a lot of custom components, then it's good to know that. If they're telling you that they're, like emailing or reading the news, then you know that their level of proficiency with certain finer points of operating web controls might be different. But don't make too many assumptions. Make sure you're asking your users. Like one thing, this actually brings me back to the last question. We were talking about long pages and heading structures. Understand that, advanced users might know a lot more about like what shortcuts to use. We recently did a usability study that included a lot of expert users, and they all had, they immediately were using the heading shortcut key for their screen reader. Granted, that might be something that you'd find across a broad range of users, right? Whether they're newer or more experienced. But because these people were very expert users, we just knew that right away. As soon as they opened any page, the first thing they did was match their H key to get those headings. And that's something that's going to be really important for your user base. Understanding where they're at in terms of both their technology comfort level and their assistive tech comfort level. Excellent question.
Another question from Matthew. Another kind of specific case, but would a news ticker widget on a website cause problems for accessibility? Also, do you know of good resources that would have research or studies related to these accessibility questions?
Ooh, a news ticker. Yeah, that is almost certain to be not a great experience for a screen reader user. Amy, do you want to take that one?
I suppose it may be possible to make a news ticker that is pleasant, but I think that it might be a better option to give someone a method to update that independently, because you've not only got the challenge of it either not being read by the screen reader as it changes or interrupting what the user is doing on another part of the page as a screen reader user. But you also have the concern about this news ticker updating being something that you're going to need to provide a pause feature for, because there are going to be folks for whom motion on a web page can be a problem, whether that's someone with ADHD whose attention is drawn away every few seconds, or someone who is made physically uncomfortable by motion on screen, who might otherwise normally turn off animations. I tend to find that automatically moving things will often be coded poorly for screen reader interaction and keyboard interaction. So my preference is allow me to update them when I'm ready to. and you clear a lot of those potential pitfalls.
And one thing that was asked for is particular research studies that we can point to. I'm afraid I don't have anything like that on
No.
hand, but I can tell you that anytime that we've tested even very carefully crafted, very carefully timed live messages that pop up during the user's flow that aren't exactly where they are on a page, that has potential to go wrong or confuse people. Even in our last usability study that we did with 5 expert screen reader users, the live announcement of an error message is something that did come up for at least one user as creating an issue. And so that is something that you're going to want to be aware of. A news ticker is problematic, not just because it is a live announcement and because it's constant motion, but because it's intentionally designed to take someone's attention away from what they're doing. And that's on its face kind of a unkind interaction. It assumes that the user, for some, maybe for some cases, it could be perfect. Like if somebody is just trying to passively discover new information as opposed to really, browse things manually. But in almost all cases, people want to be in control of what they're doing with interactions, and that's whether they have a cognitive disability or whether they're using assistive technology. You want to make sure that your user interface isn't intrusive and you're not relinquishing the control as a user. If you do a usability study with any folks who have cognitive disabilities like ADHD or with anybody who is using a screen reader, you might quickly find that this feature does create some problems.
And Matthew, if you'd like to just send a note to Access Works at Knowbility, I'm sure Ashley would be able to share some of their studies are not shareable because people don't want the world to know how problematic some of their products were, but some of them that have been really, had good results and we learned a lot from, I think she could share information with you. So I think, Mark, are we over time? Do we need to wrap? I wanted just to say thanks to everyone for coming. Big thanks to Bruno and Amy for making time once again to let us use their excellent presentation and then to come visit with us. We'd love for those of you who joined to stay connected to us. We have a newsletter you can subscribe to. All of these links are on our website at knowbility.org. AIR is our accessibility internet rally that we're enrolling participants right now. The kickoff will be September 26th, and you can join a team or be a judge or be a mentor or get a mentor in this community event that creates websites for nonprofit organizations and artists. Access U, where we met, Amy and Bruno, and you're welcome to keep an eye out on the website for Access U announcements. We'll have another conference in May of 2025 at St. Edward's University in Austin, but also as a hybrid event, you can attend remotely. And please consider donating. Please consider giving Knowbility some consideration in your year-end giving. I know the season of everyone asking you for money is coming right up, but our community programming relies on the generous support of advocates like you. So take a look. The donate button, as you can imagine, is very easy to find on our website. And again, stay in touch, volunteer. There's many ways to help support the mission of digital equity, including just coming to these and learning about it. So thanks again. Take the survey. We'll include this in the follow-up email, the link to this survey. Tell us what you'd like us to focus on in the future. And again, another big thanks to Amy and Bruno, and to all of you for being here, and to Mark for doing such a good job of keeping all the tech running smoothly. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.